The song starts with a choir of Stephen Hawking's. Well, it's a bunch of DECtalk voices singing anyway, which is the text-to-speech module that's most famous for being used as Stephen Hawking's voice. What most people recognize as the DECtalk voice is actually just one voice bank, who they've called Paul. But there's actually a couple different voices to choose from. Some of them don't sound as good as others when they sing, so I picked out the ones I thought sounded best for my choir. It's a real pain to get them to sing because you have to give each one the correct note and length of time to sing for each syllable. So I did that for every voice, doing every harmony in every choir part, and then I down-selected from there. There's a bit of an issue though. Choirs sound thick and luscious because people don't sing perfectly. If everybody in the choir sang perfectly on pitch, it would sound a lot smaller and some overtones would be emphasized in some weird ways. The big choir sound that you hear from things like O Fortuna actually comes from this semi-chaotic phasing between a bunch of people singing almost the same note. But my DECtalk choir sings perfectly. To introduce some imperfections into the singing, I ran every single DECtalk part through this tape player, which wobbles around just like a human voice would. That also took forever, especially since sometimes this tape player goes overboard with the wobbliness. But after that, it was just a matter of stacking all the parts together and mixing it. I really like how it turned out, so I'll make an isolated track video for just the DECtalk choir. Going back to the song, after my own vocals come in, I replace the DECtalk choir with an orchestra of Daxophones. I don't know why I keep making these huge ensembles of instruments. I think I just keep forgetting how much work it takes. But if I'm being honest, I am thinking about doing more. Like, think about the difference between a violin and a string section, or a trumpet and a horn section. Stacking instruments together makes them sound so good, like, I just can't resist. Anyway, the Daxophone is this awesome instrument invented by Hans Reichel in the 80s. First, you clamp this piece to a table, and then you tighten a wooden tongue onto it. This block has a piezoelectric inside it, which picks up the vibrations from the instrument and turns it into a signal that I can plug into my amp. Piezoelectrics are also called contact microphones because you can stick them to whatever you want and it'll record the sound going through it. Anyway, to play the Daxophone, you bow it with a cello bow while effectively changing the resonating length of the tongue with this curved wooden block. To me, the Daxophone sounds like a mixture between like a cello and a human voice, but it can also make some pretty crazy animal sounds. I will say though, this instrument is extremely hard to play, and I actually don't think I've ever heard anybody play it well. I probably shouldn't say that. I'm just saying you'll never hear anybody play Vivaldi on it. It's mostly used for atonal experimental music, probably because it's so hard to play any sort of like melody, but I think the creator probably envisioned it as more of a melodic instrument. If you listen to his album Yuxo, which is unironically a great album, you'll hear he really had a focus on melody and harmony. I've heard that he may have used pitch correction to actually get it to play in key, which would explain a lot. God knows I had to use pitch correction. I think it might be possible to make this instrument more playable, though. I don't think it's been given the proper attention. It seems like nobody knows what's the best shape for the tongue. The resonators of other instruments seem to be pretty simple geometric shapes, like a piano string is a cylinder, and xylophones are rectangular prisms, flutes are cylinders, etc. But for whatever reason, the Daxophone community likes to make all these crazy shapes. I ended up making a couple tongues with my BFF, and we found the ones that worked the best were the triangular ones. A simple geometric shape. Imagine that. I sort of feel like if someone buckled down and scientifically figured out the best way to make a Daxophone, we might be able to get a playable instrument. I think most people developing it are probably just trying out stuff in kind of a chaotic way, and I think using the scientific method would probably really help. Anyway, I recorded it a bunch and made an ensemble, of course. I'll make an isolated track video if you want to hear it. It turned out pretty cool. I'd recommend that isolated track above a lot of others I've put out. So going back to the song, I come in with some filtered white noise. White noise contains every frequency, so all I had to do was adjust a filter continuously to make a melody. I'm essentially just removing everything that isn't my melody. That was kind of fun, because you can adjust the tightness of your filter to make it strictly play your note, or you can let in notes that are roughly close to your note. That's how I fade between playing a melody and making these wind-like sounds. During that section, and actually throughout a lot of the song, I use Logic Pro's stock string section plugin, but fed through my Wobbly tape player to give it some character. The next instrument to come in is actually another Daxophone. This time I pluck it to get like an upright bass kind of sound. It's pretty hard to know how a new instrument should fit into your music. What's worked best for me in the past is to compare the new instrument to an existing one. Because no matter how creative you may be, you're not creating any new frequencies, and your instrument probably sounds sort of similar to something that already exists. I've found that I have the most success integrating new instruments when I treat them like their sound-alikes would be treated. For example, plucking a Daxophone kind of sounds like an upright bass, so it's a pretty safe assumption it's going to sound good doing a walking bass line under some slow jazzy part. Don't let that stop you from trying some crazy ideas, though. Writing tips are like tools in your toolbox, not prescriptions, in my opinion. Okay, so we start with a jazzy verse and some drums kick in. Most of the drum sounds in this song come from data sonification. Data sonification is just when you convert non-audio data into audio. For example, the kick drum in this song is actually data from the gravitational waves created by the collision of two black holes. That sounds way more intense than my actual kick drum sounds. The snare and the tom are made from earthquake data, and the brushing on the snare head is actually brainwave data of people meditating. The cymbals are just stock drum sounds from Logic, but I run it through my tape player to give it character. Using stock instruments can cheapen the music, so if you do that, I recommend scrambling the sound somehow. So, along with the data sonification drums, I also introduce a trumpet-like sound. This sound is actually data sonification from solar radiation from Tucson, Arizona. Then, near the end of the verse, we get some Robotic flute, which was made by Diabolical Labs. I really love how the flute part turned out, and it makes me sad that to balance the mix I had to turn it down pretty low. It uses a fan to generate the air, and actually I had to turn it on and off using a designated MIDI note when I was writing a part for it. I could have just left it on, but actually I was able to squeeze a little expressiveness out of it by cutting the air supply while a note was being played. I think some engineers would probably have opted to use bellows instead of a fan when making a robotic flute to reduce the noise, but actually I kind of love that a fan was used. It makes it sound more robotic, and I don't know, if you want a human-sounding flute, then get a human to play it. Again, I'll make an isolated track for this one too. As we head into the chorus, we get some wobbly bell sounds that are coming from wine glasses filled with water. It's pretty common to play wine glasses this way, but when you slosh the water around a little, you get a nice vibrato, kinda. When the chorus picks up, I introduce some of Logic Pro's stock tubular bells that I, again, ran through my tape player. I wanted to use tubular bells that were generated from physics equations, but I couldn't get them to sound right. I contacted the author of this paper, and he actually got back to me. He went and found the plugin that he developed along with the paper, and he took the time to send it to me, even though he was retired. So that was awesome. The plugin that he developed was an older version of a PC exclusive, so I had to grab my old laptop from college and wait like 30 minutes for it to boot up. And then I had to download a free DAW, and actually I got this plugin kind of working, but I think I was running into some audio driver issues or something because I couldn't get anything to come out sounding right. I'm sure his plugin sounded great, and I wanted to use it, but it was just eating up too much time, so I just defaulted to Logic Pro's stock tubular bell sounds. Kinda bummed about it. Anyway, turning our attention back to the chorus, as the climax is reached, I jingle some bells that are from Arcosanti. Arcosanti is it's like a mini utopia town in Arizona that makes these bronze bells. Personally, I feel like Arcosanti is pretty close to what I think we should shoot for in terms of building communities. The idea was to have a super efficient, eco-friendly, self-sustaining community that prioritizes social interaction and beauty. What more could you ask for? Like, everything you need is within walking distance within this multi-level complex of beautiful architecture. No giant stretches of road filled with noisy 2,000-pound death machines separating rectangular buildings. Like, imagine the ancient Roman Forum, but futuristic. We could do that now, you know. Why aren't we doing that? Anyway, they sort of failed at being self-sustaining, so they do tours and workshops and make these bells to support their income. Maybe their original goal was a bit too lofty, but that doesn't mean we can't grow in this direction, in my opinion. If I was an art snob, maybe I would say that the idea of Arcosanti is somehow related to the album, but no way, Jose. Anyway, I bought a bell and applied a pitch shift to it so I could make it play whatever melody I wanted. The pitch correction didn't work perfectly, but that gives it this cool robotic sound that I decided to lean into at times. So the second chorus ends, and we head into a second verse where I introduce a marimba type sound. This sound was actually made by running lots of simulations of a classic physics problem called the double pendulum. It's usually used as an example of the butterfly effect in chaos theory, but that's too much to explain here, so if you want to know more, I made another video explaining it, and you can check that out. For this instrument, I set up a whole bunch of virtual pendulums with different lengths, and then I used an input sound to disturb the pendulum's anchor point. I found that the best sounding input was a bonk from this wooden spoon. I really like how this one turned out too, so I'll make an isolated track, and you can check it out if you're interested. So as the second verse comes to an end, we head into a new section, which maybe you could call the centerpiece of the song. It feels that way to me anyway. The Daxophone and the flute and the solar radiation trumpet all take turns doing these quick little runs as the DECtalk choir does a little singing. For this part, I used the fretted side of the wooden block on the Daxophone. It creates this really cool sound, but there's no way in hell anybody could control the pitch coming out of this thing, so I did a bunch of pitch correction to fit it into the song. Then, the hoppy DECtalk theme brings down the energy. I really love the flute during this part. The sound of the solenoid smacking makes it really sound robotic. Over this section, I slowly ease in the other instruments one at a time. And this synthy type sound that starts to pop up is actually just me slowly moving my electromagnetic microphone across a tiny CRT TV. Then I start to turn up the sensitivity of my double pendulums, and because my simulation is inherently unstable, I can push them to the point of glitching. So the energy swells and then drops again for the third chorus. One more buildup, and we finally get to the climax with a bunch of layered vocals. From there, I wind down the energy one more time and land on a final melody, which is the chorus from Heart to Heart. I decided to end the album with some audio I found on this old tape from the 60s. I think it ties everything up pretty nicely. And that's it. That's the last song on the album. If you'd like to hear this song without me interrupting it, I'll put a link in the description. Hopefully you've enjoyed these videos. This album was a lot of work, and I don't know if I'm going to do something like this again. I'd love to, but to be honest, it's not really a reasonable thing to do. I'll still make music. It'll probably just mean I make fewer instruments. So, until then, I guess, have a good one.